Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, the top 25 coaches poll preseason just released today. The fellas are going to dig into it, talk about some teams that might be a little too overrated, some teams that some people might be sleeping on. Now, before we do, just want to say one, thank you to you guys. It feels like just the other day we were saying thank you for 7,000 subscribers, already up to 7.2. The support you guys have shown truly does mean a lot. So one, if you do enjoy the content, you want to support the boys, consider subscribing to the channel. But two, and more importantly, and I truly mean this when I say it, the best part about doing this is talking ball with you guys in the comment section. So let me know some teams that you guys are high on, some teams that you might be or teams that other people might be sleeping on. Love chopping it up with you guys in the comment section. Dill, let's start with the first top 5 teams: Georgia, Michigan, Alabama, Ohio State, LSU. Early takes on these top 5 teams here.
I think this is how I'd have the top 5. I think the one debatable team you might be able to throw into the top 5 is USC.
Yeah.
But I think these, to me, are the 5 most complete, best teams in the country. I'm very surprised to see Michigan number 2. And I'm a Michigan guy. That's my team. But I'm awfully surprised to see them above Ohio State and Alabama, frankly.
Yeah, I think so. Georgia, the number 1 team in the country. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that. Now, 2 through 5, you could say you want to throw Ohio State in at number 2. You could say you want to throw Alabama in at number 2 and kind of reverse those orders. I'd be okay with it, right? I think Michigan coming in as far as preseason polls go, it's just they're the most complete team. Like you look at Alabama, question mark at the quarterback position. You look at Ohio State, question mark at the quarterback position. Michigan kind of, with all that production returning, seems to be the most complete team outside of Georgia. Now, Dill, I do kind of want to dive into Alabama and Ohio State because they're easily like the second and third most talented teams in the country. And I feel like the national media is kind of losing sight of how good these teams are just because the quarterback spot is being all that's talked about.
I think Ohio State is severely underrated in a sense because I think that defense is awfully good. And if you think it's going to get better with Knowles, which I think it will, they pretty much are returning the bulk of the guys on that unit or the big impact players. So I think that unit's really, really good. I think you just trust it at this point, Ohio State, to play good offense because that's what they do. I think they're the underrated team. I'm okay with Bama there. Like, I get Alabama's talented, but they're coming off a really disappointing year and have a lot to replace.
Yeah, Nick, this is the most amount of questions you've had through a Nick Saban coach team heading into a season in a very long time. Like, it's not only the quarterback. You lose Will Anderson. You have a bunch of new faces in the secondary. One thing I will just kind of highlight with Ohio State real quick before we move on to the next 5 is, like, that defense, and you said it, they're underrated. I mean, you look at preseason polls for, like, all Big Ten teams, it's like 6, 7 Ohio State guys. They're going to send about 6 or 7 guys to the NFL draft.
That's real.
We're Michigan guys. We're not carrying no water for Ohio State. Like, this is a legit, really good defense with a lot of talent. And again, I'll trust the offense. I guess one, like LSU, this is a really good team that I think the storyline for them is they added depth, much needed depth, especially on that defensive line in the transfer portal. But also going into 2023, I feel like you have a better sense of who this team is. Like year 2 under BK, you know Jaden Daniels is your guy at quarterback. You know Malik Neighbors is your guy at wide receiver. Harold Perkins, Mason Smith. It's a loaded team, but I think they have an identity of who they are versus 12 months ago. Like, it was a talented team, but you didn't know who the quarterback was. Keyshawn Boutte in BK's doghouse. This year, heading into 2023, I think you have a little bit more confidence in this LSU Tigers program.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And again, I like that top 5. It's hard for me to keep USC out as we get into the next crop just because Caleb Williams, I mean, he's still the best player in college football, in my opinion. And when you have the best player at that quarterback spot, you can mask up a lot of deficiencies. And again, you look, USC did kind of reload that defense, or at least try to. They tried last year too, and we'll see if they do it. But I think USC certainly has an argument to be that number 5.
I will say I've been carrying the water for USC. This is a team that you mentioned it best. This offense is going to be top 5. I don't see a really scenario where this isn't one of the best offenses you have in the country. Caleb Williams with all that talent, Lincoln Riley calling the plays. This defense, for people who might have not kept track, I really do think this USC defense got better. They added not only a ton of talent, but they also added a ton of depth. And that was a bona fide top 10 team in the country when Caleb Williams was healthy. with a horrible defense. If that defense just takes some steps in the right direction, I mean, you talk about national title contender teams. Like USC is one of those teams because they have Caleb Williams in that defense. I really do think takes some strides. This is the section where I probably have some question marks. Like, I don't know if I like Penn State. You guys heard my in-depth preview. Like, we are high on Penn State, but I don't know if I'm putting Penn State with a new quarterback over this Florida State team that is about as complete as it gets in terms of looking at their depth chart and the lack of holes that presents themselves.
I agree. I mean, I do think Penn State might be there again. It's so much of it does hinge on Drew Lock at this point.
Yeah.
So whether they make it happen will probably be him, because everything else, you look at them, they're probably a better overall team than Florida State, aside from some questions at quarterback. And again, Drew Lock.
Those questions could be, Drew Aller might be that guy now.
Travis Hunter is that guy.
Jordan Travis. Oh, you're going to trigger some Florida. They'll get in.
That's a bad flip, but he's that guy. I mean, there's no doubt about that. We know he's right up there with anyone in terms of a guy you want playing quarterback for you. And again, maybe he doesn't translate to the NFL like that, but this is a college football player who you want on your team.
Yeah, and again, that's tough. And I agree. Like, and you talk about Drew Aller's situation. He's coming in with an elite offense, with an elite running game. Like, it's going to be kind of a perfect fit in terms of him checking in and making that a complete team. Clemson, Tennessee, I like Clemson. If you trust Cade Klubnik and Garrett Riley to make this Clemson offense better, I think you feel really good about this Clemson team, because that defense, absolutely loaded. Very good front seven that's going to have a lot of NFL draft picks. Now, the Tennessee fans, I feel like I'm getting confused for a Tennessee hater. I just have a ton of questions about this team. Joe Milton, as a Michigan guy, and we've talked about this a couple times, I have some question marks about his consistency week in, week out. And then you replace Cedric Tillman, you replace Jalen Hyatt, you have to replace Darnell Wright, who was a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. That just seems like a lot of moving parts that I'm not really sure if I'm ready to have Tennessee in my top 10 heading into the season.
And there's part of me that still feels like Tennessee needs to prove it a couple more years that they can kind of move on with dealing with big losses. And again, their offense is going to get overturned. They do have the bones of it. They have a very good offensive line, and the running backs back are good. And I'd say the wideouts look like they could be very good, but they do need to answer those questions. Again, you just haven't seen this Tennessee program necessarily do that yet, like Alabama, Ohio State. Those teams, they lose a lot of guys. They're going to be right back there. I think, again, I like Tennessee. I'm probably not higher on them than you, but you look at this next group of five, you put those teams against Tennessee. It's hard to tell me that those five can't beat Tennessee.
So the big one here is Texas, and we've talked about it. Texas has the firepower, and if everything comes together, they have the firepower to win a national title. And it's not just even Texas fans at this point are tired of hearing Texas is back. But why you have so much reason to be optimistic about this Texas team this year is physicality on the defensive side of the ball and elite offensive line. Texas has had the flashy players, Quinn Ewers, Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, Jordan Whittington, Jatavion Sanders, legit all potential All-Americans, Isaiah Nayor. Now, why I'm so high on this team is because against the run, they were phenomenal all year on defense. Really physical group. And that offensive line, absolutely dominant, leading me to be really high in Texas. And I
think the culture has changed in Texas. Yeah. And when we were talking the Texas back, they never played really physical defense. They never were able to really run the ball effectively. I think, again, you look at what they've done on the trenches on offense and just the physicality and energy they play with on defense. I think that's changed. I think this team might be a top 10 team. I am really high on
top 8 for me. My pick to win the Big 12. Also my pick to probably make the college football playoffs. This is a very, very good Texas team. Now we skipped over Washington.
I like Washington, Notre Dame, Utah, Oregon, all kind of in the same boat. I think maybe not quite the top end talent yet. And we'll see, again, Washington's offense, they're going to score on anyone they play.
Yep.
I'm not sure they have the whole team yet ready to say they're in the league of a USC, a Texas, and so forth. We'll see.
This Washington team, I think, has the potential to be special because that offense is elite, and they kind of all decided to run it back, even Braylon Trice, ZTF on the defense. It's a good team. Kind of stacking these Pac-12 teams up, I think I have Oregon, the next team behind USC in the Pac-12. Then Washington and Utah, again, all really tight. You could even throw in Oregon State, but I think Washington is kind of carried by some top-end talent. Michael Penix, Rome Odunze. I don't know if that whole, the 22 starters are as good as Oregon. So for that reason, I'm leaning Oregon because I think they also have a lot of top-end talent. And then I find myself again.
Yeah, you're doing the same thing.
Mentioning Utah last.
Yeah, Utah, who's to say they're not going to go beat Oregon and Washington? They've kind of been that team so far, and I don't know. I think grouping these teams is impossible because again, they're razor tight. You saw that last year for the most part. Those games when those three teams played each other were ultra close games. I think Cam Rising does add an element to Utah that we haven't really seen for these past Utah teams. I mean, Cam Rising obviously is awesome this year if he's healthy. It's hard to convince me that this team top to bottom isn't right there.
So I'll say this, the Pac-12 I don't know why the rankings keep moving on me.
Also, Notre Dame's going to be good. I like them right here. I think
the Pac-12 after dark, it's back. 100%. For its last year, the Pac-12 after dark is back because you have a legit, really, really good Pac-12 this year. Moving on to 16 through 20, I want to. You got Texas, TCU, Kansas State, Oregon State, Oklahoma, North Carolina. My biggest question mark here, TCU. I've been kind of actively. I'm not hating on TCU because I don't want to do the same thing I did last year, whereas TCU's not that good. They're not that good, and they just keep winning games. Sonny Dykes has his program going in the right direction. I have question marks about how much NFL talent they need to replace, and have they recruited to that level where they can replace that talent and still be a top 20 team in the country? I don't think so.
Yeah, and I mean, it is tough to say, you look at North Carolina with Drake May. I mean, that's a really, really good team. Oklahoma looks like, and if Brent Venables can kind of make that trend, I don't know, make that defense work a little bit, which obviously they were horrible last year. Looks like they have talent. I'm kind of with you. I think TCU is getting maybe a little bit of a last year hangover, if you will, for what they are coming in.
I don't even think so. I don't even think I'd use the word hangover. I just don't know if they could. I mean, you think about who they need to replace, and this is not a TCU team that's like Georgia. They had the third most draft picks, I believe, in the NFL draft in 2023. And so Georgia, they recruit to that level so they can just kind of reload immediately. I don't know if TCU has. I mean, Max Duggan, an absolute gamer. Quentin Johnston, my wide receiver one going into the draft. Kendre Miller, one of the best backs in the country. Steve Avila, and then 3 or 4 draft picks on the defense. It just seems like a lot of production, a lot of star talent that they need to replace, and I don't know if they can do that. Now, I want to talk a few teams. One, Oregon State. I think we disrespected them by not including them in that conversation to potentially win the Pac-12. This is a team that
I'm not going to lie. I think when I look at the top 15, not one of these teams I would throw into the top 15. I don't even think they have a great case.
You think they got a cutoff?
Right. I think the cutoff's pretty stark.
All right. So
you're telling me you'd take Oregon State over Notre Dame with the Sam Hartman or those Pac-12 teams that are just way more talented. I know they had a good year last year. I know they had a good year last year, but those teams were kind of overhauling their programs. I do think they make a little bit of a bump in the second year, and they're just so much more talented.
Okay, my closing argument on Oregon State is that was a really good team that Pac-12 teams did not want to play last year. Florida certainly didn't want to play them in the bowl game. And then I think they get better at quarterback, whether it's DJU, whether it's a true freshman Aiden Childs, the quarterback play for a 10-3 team. And then you look at the quarterback numbers, it was bad. It was not good. It was not a 10-3 team. That quarterback play takes a jump and you still have that production. I think Oregon State, again, you're probably right. I don't know if they have the talent they recruited to that level to be a top 15 team. That being said, Oregon State's a team you don't want to mess with. Now, let's talk Oklahoma. This is a team that I think could be a top 15 team down the season. If you expect some improvements on the defense, which we certainly think they can, where do you see Oklahoma kind of shaking out when we're talking about November's last rankings?
I mean, it's not to say they can't, but I think going into the preseason, it's really hard to have them above teams like Texas and Utah. Again, you just look last year, Texas, I know there were some injuries for Oklahoma heading into that game, but you don't lose 48-0. And no matter what, almost in a sense. So I do think they're a ways away from Texas. They're turning it around. They're recruiting at an extraordinarily high level. They did bring in a good transfer portal crop, but I'm not sure I don't know. It's hard just given how bad it was last year to think that it's going to be 180 and they're going to be a top 15.
Yeah, I'm a believer.
They belong in the top 20, I would say, because they're talented enough for that. But you're going to need to show me first, I think.
Yeah, and then not to disrespect Kansas State, returning all their offensive linemen, really good run game. And then UNC, that's just a
Kansas State belongs there, I think.
Yeah, and then like North Carolina, can they play defense? Because if they can, they're a top 20 team. If they can't, Drake May is probably good enough to have you as a top 25 team. But, man, it's hard to see the defense getting worse. So it's like that's optimistic.
Oh, yeah, that was the bottom. It was like similar to USC. They played as bad as you can play on as one unit.
Rounding out the top five, or the last five of the top 25. Wisconsin, obviously a lot of change. Wisconsin, Ole Miss, just they're building through the transfer portal here. Tulane, your only G5 team in there. Texas Tech, Texas A&M. Shout out the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Finally getting some national respect. This is a team that I was kind of on the bandwagon. I'm not right a lot, but I was right about Texas Tech last year. And now everyone's kind of getting on board, and it's hard not to with Coach McGuire and what he's doing. I guess I want to start with, I feel like they just threw in the Texas A&M Aggies because you got to save face. This is a team that could be
they belong. They belong here. That is a wildly talented team. Again, you talk a little bit like, are these teams that couldn't play defense, if they just take a little bit of a step, they're really good. Texas A&M can just play moderately decent offense. They kind of get vaulted right up in that top 20 conversation because this defense, with the young playmakers they had on both sides of the ball, I guess, obviously that defensive line was super young. They look like they're going to be studs. You got a ton of wide receivers who can really play, led by Evan Stewart. I think this team can go be a top 20 team for sure. I think they're the best in this group, frankly.
Oh, they could be a top 10 team. I think this team, Texas A&M and Texas, are the two schools that like the variance. Like Texas is a bona fide top 5 team if it all comes together, and I could see them being outside the top 15 in the season. Texas A&M, I could see them going 6-6 or 5-7, losing record.
They're a victim of what the opposite of what TCU has is like where their kind of reputation is preceding themselves into this number 25 spot. But you look, when they play good, they can play with anyone because no one has that type of talent really besides Georgia, Ohio State, and Alabama.
Texas A&M, it's really hard to find teams that have the firepower to compete for national titles. Like Texas A&M, they have the firepower.
Theoretically, they have it now. Like they're not even playing nearly at that level, or haven't been.
And you haven't seen even.
I don't know. That's really, really loaded team.
The list of voters don't care about them. No, that'll do it for the top 25. Again, it's going to be a fun season because I feel like everyone can win. Like there are a lot of teams that can win a national title. There are a lot of teams that can make the college football playoffs. So it's going to be a fun year. Obviously,
I agree with that. You might have close to like 10 to 15 teams that theoretically have a real shot. And again, like that's not to say those 5, like last 5 or so are favorites by any stretch of the imagination. But like if things work out for Oregon, that team can go win a national title. I think you can say the same.
A lot of teams.
Think about like even Washington.
A lot of it has to do with Georgia taking a step back, which I wouldn't count on. That being said, it is going to be a fun year. A lot of returning quarterbacks that have the juice to do stuff special. Again, appreciate you guys rocking with the boys. Do enjoy the content. Consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate y'all, and we'll talk to you guys later.